The practice tests focus on key concepts that are important for the safety of food in a food service operation. Each test has 15 questions that are very similar to the real questions that might be on your exam. Question 61. Which of the following is not considered to be one of the big 8 allergens? A. Lobster, B. Eggs, C. Soy, D. Onions. Answer D. Although a person can be allergic to any kind of food, there are 8 foods that pose the greatest risk. These are known as the Big 8. Milk, soy, eggs, wheat, some kinds of fish, some kinds of seafood, peanuts, and tree nuts are the 8 most common allergens. Foods that contain these allergens should be clearly labeled and employees should know what they are. Also, an employee should be able to inform a customer as to the ingredients in each dish in case they are asked by a customer who suffers from food allergies. Question 62. When cooking a T-bone steak, where should you insert a penetration probe thermometer to check its temperature? A. In the side of the meat. B. In the thickest part of the meat. C. On the surface of the meat. D. Between the meat and the bone. Answer B. Cooking temperatures need to be taken from the center of the food. This is because the inner parts take longer to heat up than the outer parts. ServSafe uses the term internal cooking temperature instead of simply cooking temperature to emphasize the importance of this concept. The best place to take the internal temperature of any piece of meat is in the thickest parts because it's closest to the center, and you should always take the temperature from at least 2 different locations of the meat. When cooking any kind of food, the internal temperature should be taken from the center, not just meats. But foods that are already cooked and are being hot held for service are different. Hot held foods should have their temperatures taken from both the center and near the surface. This is because the surface is exposed to cooler room temperatures. Question 63. Which symptom should cause a sick employee to be excluded from a food service establishment? A. Abdominal pain. B. Excessive tiredness. C. Sneezing. D. Vomiting. Answer D. Staff should always report when they are sick, but that doesn't always mean that they need to be excluded from the establishment. In some cases, they can be restricted from working with exposed food and food contact surfaces. But if an employee has any of the following symptoms, they should not be allowed into the operation. Diarrhea. This is a sign that the employee may have a foodborne illness. Also, there is a risk of accidents that could spread the illness further. Vomiting. This is also a sign that the employee may have a foodborne illness, and like diarrhea, there is also a risk of accidents that could spread the illness further. Jaundice. This is a symptom of hepatitis, which very infectious and can be spread through food. Also, it is caused by a virus that may not be killed by regular cooking methods. If an employee has jaundice, it should be reported to your regulatory authority. A sore throat with fever. This is a symptom of foodborne illness, and the employee should not be allowed into the operation. An open wound that is bleeding or oozing. In this situation, the wound may be properly covered and the employee is restricted to working with non-food contact surfaces. It's a case-by-case basis and the supervisor should make the call. If the employee has symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, they should not be allowed to return to the establishment until they have been symptom-free for 24 hours and have a written release from a medical practitioner. Question 64. A dishwashing machine should have the ability to measure which of the following: A. Water temperature, B. Water pressure, C. The concentration of cleaning and sanitizing agents, D. All of this. Answer D. ServSafe recommends using an automatic dishwasher that measures water temperature, water pressure, and the concentrations of chemical cleaners and sanitizers, and information about the correct settings for these measurements should be posted on the machine. Question 65. When is a foodborne illness considered an outbreak? A. When more than one variety of pathogens is discovered in the same food product. B. When a person must be hospitalized due to a foodborne illness. C. When at least two people experience the same symptoms after eating the same food. D. When a foodborne illness is linked to multiple food service establishments. Answer C. If two or more people exhibit the same foodborne illness symptoms after eating the same food, it is considered an outbreak. If it were only one person exhibiting the symptoms, then it would be difficult to identify which food caused the illness. Once the food and establishment have been identified by regulatory authorities, then a proper course of action can be taken. Question 66. Why must ground meats be cooked to a higher temperature than whole cuts of meat? A. The grinder used to process ground meats that has a higher likelihood of harboring pathogens. B. Overcooking a whole cut of meat may result in a burnt texture on the surface of the meat. C. Air pockets within the ground meat prevent it from cooking evenly. D. More pathogens reside on the outside of meat, and grinding redistributes to pathogens throughout the meat. Answer C. The outside of meat contains more pathogens than the inside. This is because it comes into contact with more surfaces and is more likely to be exposed to conditions that encourage pathogens to multiply. When whole cuts of meat are cooked, the outside of the meat receives the most intense heat. This will ensure that the pathogens on the outside are killed. When meats are ground, the outside of the meat blends throughout the meat. For this reason, ground meat should be cooked to a higher internal temperature than whole cuts of meat. Another reason that ground meat should be cooked to a higher temperature is that it contains more animals. A beef roast contains the meat from one cow. Ground beef could contain the meat from dozens of cattle. If the meat from one sick cow is ground together with 20 healthy cows, the risk is spread to more people. A higher cooking temperature is an extra precaution for the risk. Question 67. Which of the following is not considered to be cross-contamination? A. Leaving foods in the temperature danger zone for too long. B. Mixing raw food with cooked food that will then be served without further cooking. C. Storing food on a shelf where it could drip or leak onto the food stored below it. D. Using the same cutting board for chicken and beef. Answer A. Cross-contamination occurs when a food or a food contact surface comes into contact with something that is contaminated. One example is when an employee who was handling raw foods then handles ready-to-eat foods or surfaces that will come into contact with ready-to-eat foods without first washing their hands or these surfaces. Another example is when raw foods requiring a higher cooking temperature come into contact with foods requiring a lower temperature of cooking. This can also happen indirectly, such as using the same utensils, cookware, or surfaces for foods requiring different temperatures of cooking. Cross-contamination can further be prevented with good personal hygiene and cleaning or sanitizing methods. Question 68. If a TCS food will be cold held for service, what is the maximum temperature that this food could be held? A. 45 degrees F, B. 40 degrees F, C. 41 degrees F, D. 32 degrees F. Answer C. Cold TCS foods should be stored and held for service at a temperature of 41 degrees F or lower, and if it has been allowed to remain in a temperature above 41 degrees F for more than 6 hours, it should be thrown out. Question 69. In which temperature range do pathogens grow the most rapidly? A. 125 degrees F to 140 degrees F. B. 70 degrees F to 125 degrees F. C. 140 degrees F to 155 degrees F. D. 40 degrees F to 70 degrees F. Answer B. Pathogens thrive and multiply quickly when the temperature is ideal, and they multiply the fastest between the temperature range of 70 degrees F and 125 degrees F. Raw and ready-to-eat food should never be stored for more than 4 hours in this range, but you should be even more careful than that. Pathogens can still multiply at even lower or higher temperatures. It has been determined that in order to really limit the growth of pathogens in food, it should not be exposed to prolonged periods of time within the temperature range of 41 degrees F and 135 degrees F. That's why the temperature range of 41 degrees F to 135 degrees F has been identified as the temperature danger zone. Raw and ready-to-eat food should never be allowed to remain within this range for more than 4 hours. Question 70. What is the minimum internal temperature that raw roasts, pork, beef, veal, and lamb should be cooked to for at least 4 minutes before serving? A. 135 degrees F, B. 155 degrees F, C. 165 degrees F, D. 145 degrees F. Answer D. A roast is a large and thick cut of meat and should be cooked to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees F for at least 4 minutes. Because it's much larger than other cuts, it requires more time to ensure that it is cooked thoroughly. By comparison, steaks, chops, and fillets are much thinner and only require 15 seconds at 145 degrees F. Question 71. Food from plants that will be hot held for service should be cooked to what temperature? A. 135 degrees F, B. 165 degrees F, C. 155 degrees F, D. 135 degrees F. Answer A. Fruits, vegetables, grains, rice, pasta, and legumes, beans, refined beans that will be hot held for service should be cooked to a minimum of 135 degrees F for any amount of time. This question, or a similar question, appears often on the ServSafe Manager exam and is worth further understanding. The tricky part is where it says hot held for service. Oftentimes, the foods that come from plants do not need to be cooked at all and can be left in the temperature danger zone for long periods. But once they have been cooked, they become more susceptible to harboring pathogens. This is because their outer protection, skin or peel, has been damaged. and cooked food always requires hot holding. And when some of these foods are sliced or cut open, they become even more susceptible to harboring pathogens. In this case, if it will be longer than 4 hours before service, they should either be cold held or cooked first and then hot held. Also, some plant foods, such as sprouts, should be cooked and hot held if they will be served to a high-risk population. In most cases, the foods that come from plants do not need cooking at all, but if it's being hot held, that means that it has been cooked or needed to be cooked. Question 72. The temperature of food stored in hot holding has dropped into the temperature danger zone for a period of 2 hours. What should be done? A. Move the food to a cold storage unit and label it appropriately. B. Quickly bring the food to the correct temperature. C. Throw it out. D. Serve the food as soon as possible. Answer B. Hot food should be held at an internal temperature of at least 135 degrees F while it's waiting to be served to customers. An example of this is a buffet line. Theoretically, food could be held at this temperature or higher forever and still be safe to eat, but most establishments will throw food out at the end of the day if it's been hot held all day. This is for quality reasons and not for safety. For safety, hot food should never fall below 135 degrees F for more than 4 hours, and if it does, it should be thrown out. Your establishment should have policies for how often the internal temperature of hot held food is taken. If the policy is that the temperature is taken every 4 hours, and if the temperature falls below 135 degrees F, you need to throw it out. This is because it could have been below 135 degrees F for the entire 4 hours. However, if your establishment has the policy to check the temperature every 2 hours and it falls below, then corrective action can be taken. The food can be quickly heated back up to 135 degrees F and still be safe to eat. Question 73. What is the FIFO method? First in, first out. A. Marking packaged food items with a use-by date. B. Storing food items so that the oldest is used first. C. Washing hands before and after each task. D. Rotating food pans on a buffet line so that the food remains fresh. Answer B. Because all food becomes less safe over time, it makes sense to use the oldest food first and save the newest foods for later. Not only does this promote food safety, but it also contributes to the overall quality of food in the establishment. It also reduces waste by preventing food from being discarded when it could have been avoided. Although the FIFO method is effective, it should not replace other rules regarding time and temperature. Question 74. Where should the scoop for the ice machine be stored between uses? A. It should not be stored between use. Always bring the ice scoop to the dish room after each use. B. On top of the ice machine. C. Inside the ice machine. D. In a protected and designated location. Answer D. Ice deserves consideration because its safety risks are often overlooked. Ice has two purposes in a food service operation. It can be used as an ingredient in foods, beverages, and also to cool food. Although ice is used in different ways, it often comes from the same ice machine. The biggest risk with ice is cross-contamination. Freezing temperatures do not kill pathogens. The ice machine and ice scoop need to be clean and protected. Ice used to cool foods or beverages should not be reused as an ingredient in foods or beverages. In most cases, ice should only be used for one purpose and then thrown out. Ice used for raw foods should not be reused for ready-to-eat foods. Likewise, ice for raw foods that require a higher cooking temperature should not be reused for raw foods that require a lower cooking temperature. Question 75. Which person is the most susceptible to foodborne illness? A 65-year-old man. B. A teenage girl. C. A food service worker. D. A 40-year-old woman. Answer A. Preschool-age children, the elderly, and people with a compromised immune system are at the highest risk for foodborne illness. Preschool-age children have not had enough time to develop an immune system strong enough to defend against some illnesses. The elderly and people suffering from some diseases have a weakened immune system, making them more susceptible. Thank you for watching.